So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the first session of the What the Fork series, where we'll be discussing some of the relationships between fixing cities and fixing food systems. This is the first session this week, and we're kicking off with the hot topic of food waste. Food waste being identified by many people as one of the ways to tackle the climate crisis that we're all experiencing. Project Drawdown, for example, have listed it as one of their top solutions to tackling the global warming crisis that we have. So today we're going to be joined by several speakers, and this session is part of the webinar series that leads up to Build Back Better Hackathon in London at the weekend coming up. If we can move on to Benjamin in Bangkok. Benjamin is working as a food waste and sustainable solutions designer at Light Blue Consulting. You established in 2012 and have advised some of the world's biggest names in the hotel industry, from the Marriott and the Hyatt Accor Group, also government agencies and international organizations, including the Michelin Guide. You've got some incredible food waste monitoring technology in your toolbox, and you also offer incredible training programs as well that people might be interested in. I'm really curious to hear your story, Benjamin, because from my experiences in that part of the world, there's an awful lot to learn in terms of food waste management. I'm going to make you the host so you can share the screen.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris, for the invitation first, and thank you for the team at Devor for sharing. A few years back, I started in hotel sustainability in 2008 with Accor Hotel Group, and when I was implementing this certification, sustainability certification program for the pledge, Green Globe for the Novotels in Asia, I was accompanying those hotels throughout the certification process, and we were looking at the big picture of sustainability: energy, water, waste, chemicals, local communities, staff awareness, guest engagement. After a while, I left, I came back to Thailand, started to work with the UN on greening the hotel industry in Thailand, the Philippines, and with the EU in Vietnam to help to design their certification program for green hotels. And around 2012, I started my company, Light Blue. And actually, food waste came as a natural process because we're looking at all those issues, and I was in particularly interested in waste. And one day I just got stuck looking at a bin, and I was like, dude, how many kilos are in this bin? This is ridiculous. So I asked the chef, I asked him, okay, how many kilos goes in that bin? And how many bins like that do you have throughout your operation? And how often do you change it? And what goes to the bin? And how much does it cost? And what was interesting is to see that they couldn't answer it. And one of the key challenges that was touched on by Devor just before is the fact that there is a crucial lack of data that has some dire consequences. But I will come back to it quickly. So Light Blue set up since 2012, since 2013, focusing almost exclusively on food waste and food waste prevention. So we run around 45 projects so far, and we helped to save around 1 million kilos since 2015. We have been, as you said, Chris, been working. Well, initially predominantly with hotels and restaurants. So this was the greatest, I would say, share of our project in Thailand, in Singapore, in the Maldives, in France, in Denmark, with restaurant groups, with culinary institutes, and we are working more and more with international development agencies like GIZ or government agencies like TCEP. And higher education like Republic Polytechnic in Singapore. Quite some exciting things happening. Just wanted to put things back in the context as you asked, Chris, and I think that's important for the audience. Food waste. Why food waste? So first, when we look at the SDGs, at the time it was the MDGs, so the Millennium Development Goals, and if you look, there was 8 of them. Only one was focusing on environmental sustainability. And then we saw a drastic shift in 2015 with 17 of them, with almost half of those 17 goals being related to, let's call it, environmental sustainability. So that really reflects on the fact that it was a minimal kind of a narrow view earlier, and now it expanded because it's a highly complex issue, sustainability in general. And food waste, interestingly, is actually one of the only elements that is transversal. that is connecting those 17 SDGs from the biosphere level to the society, to the economy, and then to the working together along the line. So this is a very nice visual that was put together by Stockholm Resilience Institute in Sweden, and a great reminder that, hey, I mean, there are tons of challenging issues like plastic or biodiversity loss. This is not a question. The thing is, we still eat 3 times a day. And the thing is, there is a minority of people that still see the connection between food waste and climate change. And this is a serious issue. So very happy that Vivor and a lot of new organizations are coming up, and what you guys are doing as well with the Build Back Better movement. And food waste is something that is clearly misunderstood by the general public. Interestingly, food waste is a fantastic opportunity. This is the reason why we've been focusing on this issue for now 7 years. This is a report by BCG, Boston Consulting Group, that is identifying food waste as a $1.5 trillion issue, and at the same time a $700 billion opportunity. And this I would say, this environmental, social impact set aside, the financial impact and the financial opportunities related to it makes it a formidable way to drive people and to implement change if they dare to look inside their organizations. Interestingly, without spending too much time on this specific study, what they identify as the biggest promising opportunity is around awareness. And that may sound like people love to dream about like this technology that's going to save us all. Well, they're still people. If you don't raise their awareness, if you don't get them to understand why food waste is an issue, which is always how we start our process, then they won't care. So I find this a nice reflection. Now, if we are zooming back on the hospitality sector, what we have been identifying over those 7 years of practice, and really like we spend thousands of hours at the back of house, from the morning when they were opening the kitchen to the moment they were getting rid of all their food waste. We learned 3 very important, I would say, key aspects that explain why the hospitality sector has been so slow in putting the food waste higher up on the agenda. So first, there is this issue of perspective. We call it the perspective gap. The fact that if you ask hotel, restaurants, professional, how many kilos you think you waste on a daily basis, they would underestimate the quantities by a factor of 3 to 8. So this is a funny thing to do. If you ask them, okay, next time, and maybe before next time you start with the new ones, ask them how much do you think you waste per day, and then you will compare that with your data, and that's something that is shocking, because there is this natural, I would say, resistance to be transparent, to really look at the issue, because it is interpreted as the job being not well done, but it's not. It's more complicated than that. Then the second aspect is this big misunderstanding about buffet. So if we can take that opportunity to address that misconception, buffet represent only 10 to 15% of all food waste generated by hotels. If you look at the big picture, which is fundamental, to be able to look from the moment the food arrives at the back of house, the moment it is disposed, and each and every single steps in between, then if you measure what comes back from the buffet, everybody's, oh, buffet is awful. It's only 10 to 15%. So that means that if you don't look at everything related to your storage, preparation, or what comes back from your customers, you are missing out on the big picture. And the third, and probably one of the most important aspects, once you calculate diligently what is the cost of food waste for your operation, using a specific methodology, using data from your purchasing and your financial department, allocated to the different categories and the moment of occurrence, and you manage to put a price tag on your food waste, then you realize that food waste, the cost of food waste compared to the revenue, goes as high as between 6 to 14%, which is gigantic and way beyond what most of the professionals in the industry have thought it would, simply because they are using outdated financial KPIs such as food cost percentage, which is something that we must move away from very quickly if we want the industry to start addressing the issue of food waste. So this is kind of the statement, the big picture. what are some of the existing solutions? There are thousands of them. Many of them that we are covering in the different workshops that Chris you mentioned. But I want to share three of our key, I would say, solutions that are very different from one another. So the first one is actually around food waste monitoring. I won't play the video here, but what has been designed is a food waste monitoring that, let's say if you compare with other systems like the one that were mentioned earlier, the main difference is that it is not based on a hardware that you need to get from us. We design a system that is running on generic tablets that are available for a couple of $100 on the market, run on Android, and the tablets are being used as a data entry point that then connects to our cloud-based software that basically does all the measurements. So in three simple steps, from weighing to recording and disposing, then all the information are sent to the cloud-based software that processes the data. What sort of information do you get from there? You get the information related to how much, when, where, what, and why. Those key questions that are still keeping the industry from actually acting on their food waste because they don't have answers to those. And this is something that, well, if we have more time, we can elaborate on. Very happy that we got awarded the Solar Impulse Efficient Solution a couple of days back for our lit food waste monitoring system. And that's a nice recognition of the work we have been putting on this. Now, I would like to introduce you to the Pledge on Food Waste. Pledge on Food Waste is a third-party verified certification and benchmarking system that is helping restaurants of hotels and canteen to basically cut on food waste. So that's really like for their own direct benefit, to cut on costs related to food waste and to nurture the ecosystem, local ecosystem of food waste solution providers. I will explain that in a moment. But basically, there are 7 pillars and 95 criteria. Once the restaurants has implemented all those criteria fully online, then they get assessed by a third-party auditor. Those 7 pillars are, I would say, pretty standard in the structure at the beginning. The fact that is everything related to process documentation, the vision, the policy, the reporting. Then who is involved? That's the second pillar on employee commitment. Third one is about what sort of data should you collect on food waste at the back of house and at the front of house. Then you're looking at best practices, literally again looking at each of those steps where we call the critical food waste generation points, from purchasing all the way to the consumer, that the person, well, the hotel that is implementing or the restaurant should follow and show compliance with, because those procedures ensure that there is a minimum waste minimum food that is lost. And then we have two interesting components. The first one is related to customer engagement, and that's kind of next frontier. And I hope we're going to have some questions related to that, because it has been a taboo for so long in the hospitality sector. You don't talk about food waste. This is disgusting. This is not high class. This is not, something that will ruin the experience of the diners. And I think that's okay. That was good enough in the 2000s. We're 20 years from there, and people have changed. Millennials are gonna outnumber the boomers in a few years' time. Well, mentalities are changing, and now there is a good opportunity to leverage on your effort to actually reflect on your commitment to inspire your diners. And the last component, which is interesting, and that's why I was saying like nurturing the ecosystem of food waste solution providers, is the fact that once the restaurant has implemented all the key components to minimize food waste for for their own selfish benefit, they have to look around and say, okay, now that we have reduced, what else can we do? So can they start working with charities? Can they redistribute some of their food leftovers for some existing organization around that can collect and redistribute for the needies? Second, can this food waste be transformed for animal feed, and especially animals that could enter the food chain? And I think that's going to be extremely important in the context of the hackathon for what, Chris, you're putting together. The third one is, can this food waste be transformed or upcycled into something valuable? Composting or using EM to transform into natural cleaning solutions. And this helps that by having more restaurants implementing the pledge, they will have to look around and they will facilitate the development of businesses that are related to food waste prevention, whoever they are on the food waste pyramid, being at the preventive, at the redistribution, at the transformation level. This is the kind of type of beneficiaries or food waste solution providers, being the app. We mentioned them, you know plenty of them, like Too Good To Go, Olio, Karma. Kitro is part of the tech side, I would say, from the food waste monitoring system or the smart storage system. Then you have everything related to food rescue organization, more on the service side. And finally, all the pig farms or insect farms that are becoming big and a huge, I would say, topic in terms of city resilience and alternative to animal protein. I will skip the video from JW Marriott as well to avoid killing the momentum. And the last type of solution that we are looking at is capacity building. So as you said, Chris, so this is something that we spend the most of our past 4 months doing, transforming our office into a studio, and buying some funky gears like those ones, and training professionals. So we have different sets of technical workshops. Some are highly targeting hospitality sector professionals with various angles, as you can see, like from food waste monitoring system, staff engagement on food efficiency, the delicate art of sustainability communication, or engaging diners on food waste prevention. The other type of workshop that we are running is more like for government officials, international organizations, consultants, lecturers, with down the slide a list of some of the participants to our last workshops. Different modules, 3 times 3 hours or 5 times 3 hours, depending on the depth that those participants want to go, and bringing them throughout the whole story of food waste from a satellite point of view, zooming on the food supply chain, the inefficiency, the circular economy around each of those critical points where food is actually either lost or wasted. And then we're looking at deep down into kitchen operation and what sort of food waste monitoring system can be implemented, what sort of data can be collected, what can you do with those data, how those data are influencing the way you run your operation, how can those translate into financial impact, because if you don't talk money, people don't listen to you, and ultimately what are innovations and new technology to achieve zero food waste to landfill. I think this is, yeah, and I just would like to finish with 3 types of case studies, because indeed talking is nice, but what is the impact of your actions? So on the hotels, different players that we work with. So an example from Pullman in Bangkok, the indicators that we will be looking at is the total amount of food that we rescue over the period. So in that case, over 5 months, we rescue around 21 tons. So 52 tons of carbon emission, reduction of cost per cover by 6 points, which is highly beneficial, financially speaking, and 1.5 in terms of food cost percentage. If we look at JW Marriott in Phuket, for instance, it was minus 2 points on the food cost, 12 points reduction on the cost per cover, and a drastic 1/3 reduction in terms of food waste per cover, which was actually a bit higher up than what we normally achieve. Impact of action with international organization, as you mentioned, we work with the Michelin star, the Michelin guides in Thailand, and we help them to run the first zero food waste to landfill Michelin star revelation event. That was in November. So we did all the pre-work before that event to train the Michelin star chef, to train the staff of the venue, and we partner with some rescue organizations, and we set up an entire system to ensure that all food that would not be served to customer can be either rescued and sent for the needies, or transformed and sent to the pig farm as food. So we managed to save 62 kilos of food surplus and 220 kilos of organic waste that was actually sent to the pig farm instead of to the landfill, resulting in 700 kilos of carbon emission not wasted. That was 1 day. And my last example is the type of partnership that we have with government agencies. This is TSET, Thailand Convention Exhibition Bureau. Those are figures that we achieved about after 2 years of operation with them. As you can see, like pretty interesting. We convinced the government to allocate a certain budget, but that budget would be spent only if certain conditions were met, including performance condition. So each of the beneficiaries would have to show that they have been reducing food waste by a certain amount. and that they have been changing their operation in order to get this subsidies. Ultimately, so as you can see, we got results of around 321,000 kilos of food that were not wasted, $1.2 million that were not that were actually saved over the period, 781 tons of carbon emission, and more than 840 people that were trained on the food waste prevention program. This is it.
That's phenomenal.
Sorry, I've been a bit long.
Not at all, not at all. That was absolutely phenomenal. That's you see the incredible impact of food waste and the huge potential when you get it right. And it cuts across so many different levels, from financial savings for the operators to all of the different spin-off benefits that you just mentioned as well. What you can do post-consumer with all of the waste, the training that you can give to people, the skills that you can raise up, and the micro business opportunities, I think, that can come out of this as well. Does anybody have any ideas about pre-kitchen, the sort of the farm to kitchen part of the chain? Where are the opportunities? Maybe Ben, maybe you've got some ideas about how in that stage, everything that happens up to the kitchen door, where might be the best opportunities to look for food waste avoidance?
Yeah, well, it's it's something that we touch on the second module of the workshop. It's there is not one answer, because it will completely depends on where you are in terms of geographic.
Yep.
So there are huge discrepancies and very interesting studies by the World Resource Institute showing where is food waste happening on the overall food supply chain.
Yep.
From post-harvest to actually distribution, manufacturing, then distribution again, retail, and then food service or end consumer. And it's striking to see that in some areas like Saharan Africa, they are wasting close to 40% at the post-harvest level.
Yep.
Whereas in Europe or in northern in the US, for instance, it's only like 5 or 6% that is happening at the post-harvest level.
Yep.
This being said, very interesting studies as well from North Carolina researcher Lisa Johnson that has been working on post-harvest food loss and re-exploring this area. There was this common agreement that only 20% of food is remaining on the fields after the harvest has been done. Mm-hmm. She conducted some detailed studies, and they show that actually is up to 57% of the amount that was harvested that remains on the fields and that is still edible. So this in itself is a shocking figure that should be a wake-up call, because there is a lot of food that is still, ready to be picked and prepared and redistributed to feed people before thinking about productivity and higher yields. Yep. So yeah, there are a lot of things to be explored depending on where on the supply chain and where geographically speaking.
Absolutely. And you see also the importance of, that whole avoiding waste in the kitchens, because, when most of the restaurants had to close down for at least a certain period of time, suddenly potato farmers had a massive amount of potatoes that they couldn't shift. And I mean, people are still eating the same amount of food, or should be eating the same amount of food every day. So that means that at a certain point in time, too many potatoes were being wasted somewhere. And there were now thousands of tons of potatoes that couldn't get to market being plowed back into the ground. So aligning that sort of supply and demand is really important in making sure that we use land effectively and we don't end up over deforesting to create food that we're going to chuck straight in the bin. So it's a really important part of the whole story, is to look at making sure that we grow what we want, what we need, close to where we need it, that we don't waste it, and that we increase and tighten up efficiencies all the way along that chain. And I think in the urban context, again, looking for these synergies and relationships and spin-offs, so that there's no such thing as waste in the food chain. It just becomes part of a circle of an input for the next step.
May I ask? Sorry, after you.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I wanted to get your perspective. That we talk about the local circular economy and. Obviously, the supply chain and the bigger picture is very global for food. But thinking about the UK context of Build Back Better,
yep.
What have your experiences been of how restaurateurs and the food and beverage industry are willing to collaborate on projects that would improve that the local, closing the loop with waste. Have you had any success with that?
Who is the question for, sorry?
Well, I guess I'd be interested to hear from you, and also from the Verbier team, just because you've been dealing with a very local scenario.
I think it's interesting because we worked in very, very different contexts, from as I said, Maldives to Singapore to Thailand and to Denmark or France. And still, even like in the so-called developed world, where people are supposed to be more cautious or conscious, it's still super hard. You come up with solutions where the payback is less than 4 months, where you have a fantastic PR opportunity, you engage your staff, you have a way to attract new customers, and you save on cost. You would say, like, well, pretty much a good deal. Even with government money behind, there is still this huge resistance, again, related to transparency. It is challenging, it is difficult, and we have a very nice testimonial yesterday from a chef that reached 100% on the pledge on food waste certification, saying that yes, indeed, the biggest resistance from chefs is this fact that they feel exposed. Because it's new set of KPIs, it's a new component of their work that is kind of highlighted, which was never done before. It was just like going in the bins, and the bins in hotels are dozens of them, and they work like a black hole. So it goes there, it vanishes, it disappears. But now suddenly you monitor everything, you track, you put a dollar figure on it, and then suddenly they're like, wow, okay, so my operation is wasting the equivalent of $1.2 million a year. Yes, that's true. And they're like, okay, I am in big trouble. But you're like, no, not necessarily, because now you can save $300,000. But until they look at this way, it requires their boss to change their metric and say, okay, look, now it's okay. We know where we are. This is where we want to go. So resistance plus metrics, but a lot of shift of mindset, which has to be done until the industry is really picking up.
Yeah. Now, I also know that there are cafe operators and small restaurant operators who, during the COVID times, have become quite creative with not overstocking their own restaurants, with all the uncertainties of will they be open, will they not be open, and everything else, and have started to source from neighbors and other organizations. You know, so people, they've been phoning up saying, what have you got that you're not using? I'll use it. And then in that way, avoiding waste, creating more certainty for themselves in their own expenditure, and processing it into different soups or sauces and things with a longer shelf life. So that they've been utilizing almost the ghost kitchen concept. They've got all of the facilities, but they've not got the customers. So using that kitchen in a different way, there's also avoiding food waste. So I think there's some innovations on the local level to be found in that sense as well.
Yes, and I feel like this crisis has sometimes there's a chance to break down those barriers of perhaps natural competitiveness between restaurants or in a local area, and actually start to support each other a little bit more. And I guess it comes back to whether we can capitalize on that in this moment.
Yep. Great. Well, I think we're coming towards the end of the hour-and-a-half session. We could probably talk for another 3, but it is the intention that we will revisit these WTF What the Fork sessions. These are running up to the hackathon at the weekend, which should be really exciting. And hopefully we'll get some fantastic ideas out of that. And we would really like to get the panel back together with some of the best ideas that come out from the teams in hackathon, for those guys to share what they've come up with, and for us to give some feedback. So then we can keep these dialogues going and continue with the discussions.